What's up guys, I'm Breanna aka MiniMarley, and today I'm guest vlogging on EF to tell you guys all about New York City. So when I'm not making fashion videos or makeup tutorials, I absolutely love traveling. I recently studied abroad in Ghana and then I was visiting South Africa, but I currently live in New York City and this is where I call home. So I want to share some tips with you and some things to do if you're visiting New York City, because I know that this city is so huge, there's just so much to do and see, and I want to help you make the best of your experience here. So let's get started. So New York City is divided into 5 boroughs: Staten Island, Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan, and the Bronx. And if you're visiting New York City, you basically have to check out all 5 boroughs at least one time. So let's do a quick virtual tour starting in Staten Island. So this island is a great place to start just to get some background about New York, and one of the places that you can visit is the historic Richmond town. Now this is basically New York City's living history village and museum complex, and basically it's 25 acres of restored buildings and a museum where you can learn about the American experience from the colonial past to the present. While you're in Staten Island, you can also check out the Staten Island Zoo and then hop on the ferry to head over to Manhattan. So the Staten Island ferry is pretty much the only way to get from Staten Island to Manhattan, but honestly it's just a really fun boat ride and it's a free way to see the Statue of Liberty. Okay, so now we've made it from Staten Island to Manhattan, the busiest borough of New York City. So once you hop off the ferry, the first thing to do is visit the 9/11 Memorial. This is all the way downtown and it's a beautiful memorial that honors the people that died on September 11th. Then if you want to escape the noisy streets and just take a nice quiet walk, you can head right over to Battery Park, where you even have a view of the Statue of Liberty. But if you're like me and you're into shopping, the next place you're going to want to hit up is Soho. So Soho is a little bit past Chinatown and it's home to everything fashion, basically every store you can think of, and so many cute restaurants and cafes. I can literally spend my entire day in Soho, so definitely make sure that you go there when you have a lot of money and a lot of time to spend. Okay, so if you go a little bit more uptown from Soho and to the west side, then we'll be in Chelsea. Now Chelsea is a must-see place if you're into art. There's so many museums to check out and it's just the best place for art. Now for the fun part, if we move a little bit more uptown, we're finally in Midtown. Now this is the home to the Empire State Building, it's the home to Times Square, the city of bright lights, and this is where you can find something to do at pretty much any time of the day or night. So like I said, there's just so much to do in Manhattan, from the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Museum of Natural History all the way to Rockefeller Center and Radio City Music Hall. There's just so many places to see, so definitely make sure that you really explore Manhattan. On your way out of Manhattan, you'll definitely recognize Harlem because of its cultural influences from the Renaissance, and you can find that in cafes and theaters and jazz clubs if that's your thing. But make sure that you visit Harlem as you go from Manhattan to the Bronx. So once you're in the Bronx, you're pretty much all the way uptown, and there are a few things that you can do here. One of those things is visiting the famous Yankee Stadium for a baseball game if you're into sports. But if you're a little more into animals than sports like me, then I definitely recommend visiting the Bronx Zoo. This is the largest metropolitan zoo in the United States and one of the largest in the world. Okay, so if you leave the Bronx and cross over the East River, then you'll end up in Queens. So Queens is another great place if you're really into sports, especially tennis, because you can visit the Billie Jean King Tennis Center where the US Open tournament is held. But if you're a little burnt out from everything we did in Manhattan, then you can just head over to Flushing Meadows Park, which is one of the nicest parks in New York City. Alright, so it's been a long ride, but the last borough and the last stop on this train is one of my favorites, and it's in Brooklyn. So I live in Brooklyn, and like Manhattan, there's just so much to do and see here. So if it's the summertime and you're in the mood for some sand and sun, you can hit up Rockaway Beach or Coney Island. Coney Island is really famous because there's a lot of games and rides and so much food, and of course the boardwalk right along the beach. So Coney Island is definitely a summer favorite for families and kids and just pretty much anyone in New York City who wants to get a little bit of beach and also wants to have have some fun. But if it's not exactly a beach day, I definitely recommend visiting Brooklyn Heights. Brooklyn Heights is probably one of my favorite parts of Brooklyn because it's just a quiet little cozy city away from the city. So there's so much to do here. There's a lot of restaurants and cafes. You can take a nice walk, and you can also visit the Brooklyn Heights Promenade where you get the absolute best view of Manhattan. So if you're in New York City, it's just a must-see. So once you're done exploring Brooklyn, I definitely recommend hopping on the Brooklyn Bridge and walking across back to Manhattan. The Brooklyn Bridge is just a really beautiful bridge, and there's a really great view, and honestly, I recommend walking across most of the bridges in New York City if you get a chance to. Okay, so I know that was a lot to take in, and there's just so much to do in New York City, but I hope my little virtual tour gave you a few ideas of what you should definitely do when you visit New York City. But to wrap it all up, let me just give you a few of my favorite insider tips for visiting New York City. Okay, so tip number 1 is use public transportation. For New Yorkers, public transportation is an absolute must, and taxis can honestly be super expensive, especially when you're sitting in that crazy New York City traffic. So get yourself a subway map and learn how to read it and pretty much understand it, and it's really simple, I promise. If you prefer the scenic route, I also recommend renting a city bike. There's city bikes all over the city, and they're just a really great way to get around because you can stop and look at different things along the way, and it's really cheap and affordable to rent city bikes in New York City. So tip number 2 is to choose an area to explore for the day instead of trying to do everything at once. When you really try to fit too much into one day, you'll miss out on all of the little secret places and hidden treasures that are all over New York City. Okay, so tip number 3 is to ask for directions. Don't be afraid to ask for directions in New York City. People are actually a lot friendlier than you think, and they're always willing to let you know if you should be going uptown instead of downtown, or just to help you get on track when you're lost. So I hope this video was helpful if you're visiting New York City. And if you weren't sure about coming here, I hope this video encouraged you to check out New York City. Don't forget to check out my channel if you're interested in travel vlogs or makeup and fashion tutorials. And I had an awesome time guest vlogging here on EF. Bye guys.